Hey everyone, welcome back into the HawksZone Rundown. It's me, Bryce. I'm flying solo today. Ryan unfortunately got caught with a work commitment and couldn't make the show, but it is the first episode of our NFC West divisional preview shows, and we're starting with the guys that won it last year, the LA Rams. We have Blaine Grisak from Turf Show Times coming on to discuss the LA Rams, what went through their offseason, what are some of the things that are going on, how is Matthew Stafford holding up, does he think he can make it through a couple more seasons at being the signal caller for the LA Rams? What does this defense look like? How has Sean McVay grown as a coach? And what more things does Blaine want to see out of McVay to maybe help these Rams get back to the Super Bowl? And we'll also sprinkle in some Seahawks questions for Blaine and what his opinions are of Mike McDonald year two. How does he think this defense can change? Does he think this defense is elite and potential to be special? Maybe. Who knows? We'll have to see after this.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about
Man, let's go. It's go time, baby.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You ready to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Defense trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Can't chase it. What a catch! Jackson Smith and Are you kidding me? Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts Ryan and Bryce.
All right, everyone. I'm lucky enough to be joined by Blaine Grisak coming in from Turf Show Times podcast. He also does fantasy football writing over at SB Nation as well. Blaine does a great job covering the LA Rams, our division rival over there. And Blaine, I just want to say thanks for coming on the show. And what's going on?
No, I appreciate you having me. Excited to get to talk about these two teams. I think the Rams Seahawks obviously it's a rivalry that goes pretty far back, and I think the NFC West is going to be a pretty interesting division this year.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how it shapes up. It kind of feels like it's getting back to being one of those more powerful divisions in the NFL, and something that I think for the last few years maybe it's kind of teetered off. We've seen the Niners go through their ups and downs, the Rams, Seattle's gone through their kind of moments of being a struggling team, and the Cardinals, well, they're just the Cardinals, and they kind of tend to disappoint all the time. But so let's get into the discussion today. So what I wanted to talk about first off was kind of the Rams' evolution they've gone through, this offseason. Cooper Kupp's no longer a part there. He's here in Seattle now, which is one piece that you guys have, moved on from. You brought in Davante Adams to pair with Puka Nacua. But just in general, like, what did you think of your guys' offseason as a whole compared to what you were coming off of last year, where you guys gave the Philadelphia Eagles a pretty big scare in the NFC divisional round there?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to two things, and that's Sean McVay kind of wanting to get back to maybe his original plan for when he got to Los Angeles, which was he wanted to come in, wanted to run these two tight end sets, which is why they took Gerald Everett in the second round. But the guy they took in the third round, Cooper Kupp, kind of threw a wrench in that, so that they become this 11 personnel offense, and that was obviously very, very successful for them. So they I think there's a really good chance we get kind of this fourth iteration of the McVay offense. When he first came to LA, they were this wide zone run team that kind of ran play action off of that. Then they get into this empty spread stuff with Stafford, and then they're back under center, and kind of moved more towards like a gap run scheme last year and in 2023. So I think this year we kind of get back to McVay kind of goes to what his original plan was going into this 12 personnel stuff, which is why they drafted Terrence Ferguson in the second round. It's why they've probably had they've had rumored interest in Brock Bowers and Dalton Kincaid in the previous two drafts, and so I think that's gonna be part of it. And then just kind of what I think McVay also wants to get back to being more explosive. This was an offense that their success rates were really high, but their EPA was pretty average, which means on a down to down basis they were pretty good, but just they were having to work so hard to get down the field 4, 5, 6 yards at a time, which just takes its toll mentally, I think, on an offense. So I think McVay kind of really praised Liam Cohen and what he did in Tampa Bay last year. So, and especially in the run game. So, they drafted Jarquez Hunter in the I think it was the fourth round, and so hopefully we see a little bit more of an explosive offense than we've seen in the past.
So with that being said, do you think that means that with the addition of Davante Adams there in that receiving core to go with Puka Nacua, and you saying they want to go back to their 12 personnel and kind of the things that McVay is really comfortable with and likes to run coming out of that West Coast Shanahan scheme, do you think they go back to a wide zone attack in the run game with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, or do you still think they stick with that power gap scheme, or is it going to be more of a mix?
I think it's going to be a little bit of a mix. Their offensive line, just the way they built it over the last couple of years, I don't think is necessarily built to run a wide zone. They just have a lot of, I think Kevin Dotson is 320 plus. Steve Avila is also pretty big. They do move well in space, but they're a lot heavier than your typical Shanahan offensive lineman. So I do think it's going to be more of a mix of that gap scheme stuff and maybe more of a mid zone inside zone mixed in.
So with the addition of Terrence Ferguson there as a tight end in that room, now you've got Colby Parkinson, an ex-Seahawk that's there. Tyler Higbee's still there from my understanding, but he's still kind of battling injuries and trying to get fully healthy, right, from where he was a few years ago, at least in the player that he was. Like, how do you see this tight end room shaping up? Is it really Terrence Ferguson as the starter and then Parkinson's kind of the additional piece, or how do you see this room shaping up for you guys?
Yeah, I still see Higbee being, I think, the number one tight end. I mean, even when he came back last year, his first game back, he scores the game-winning touchdown against the Cardinals. He got really involved in the playoffs. He's a guy that McVay and Stafford, quite frankly, they both really trust. So I don't see Higbee being phased out by any means. He's obviously getting older, obviously coming off of he will be a full year removed from that major knee injury. So yeah, I still see him being that tight end that that Stafford and McVay trust, but I kind of see Ferguson kind of being mixed into that Cooper Kupp role, kind of that big slot that can work the zones in the middle of the field and go that route. I think that they can kind of create some mismatches on linebackers and stuff that way.
So let's flip onto the other side of the ball. Obviously, you guys had Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk came in last year and kind of, I would say, helped smooth the transition away from Aaron Donald, who is a Hall of Fame player in his own right. How do you see them taking their steps here in year two? Obviously, Jared Verse had a defensive rookie of the year type season. How does that defensive style evolve, I guess would be the saying, because the one thing I'll ask you later on is about the secondary, but what is your thing about this front seven that makes it potentially a special unit going forward?
I think it's just the way they work off of each other, and I mean that's kind of why the Rams, I think, drafted both Jared Verse and Braden Fisk in the same draft, is because they had that familiarity of working off of each other on what was a pretty dominant defense at Florida State. So I think it's just kind of, like I said, just kind of how they work off of one another. And then just as far as taking a step forward this year, I'd like to see Braden Fisk get better against the run. He's pretty small, and he got exposed in that facet of his game last year. And then for Verse, he's so fun to watch. I love watching Jared Verse. He's so powerful. I think probably you could probably consider him one of the stronger edge rushers in the NFL, even as a rookie. Just the way he quite frankly just pushes offensive tackles off balance with his bull rush is pretty special. So, but with that said, I would like to see him kind of become more than that, and maybe add some more finesse or speed and speed moves to his game to kind of get to that next level. I think last year he only trailed Myles Garrett among edge rushers in high quality pressure. So he is very good, but I think to kind of become that next level defensive player of the year caliber player that he can be, I think he just needs to kind of diversify his toolbox a little bit more.
So let's move on to the guy that's basically, kind of been at the forefront of some of the discussions in some of the past off seasons here, whether it be with injury, whether it be with contract stuff. What's the expectation for Matthew Stafford? We're talking about a quarterback that's aging, that has a history of back issues. He could be potentially one hit away from having, a term of being on the bench for a while. I know you guys have Jimmy Garoppolo there, but what is the kind of expectation of Matthew Stafford now at this point in his career with the LA Rams? How much longer do you think he's going to be the LA Rams quarterback? Do you think the trade this year in the draft had anything to do with stuff that they may think may be coming down the pipe and need to start looking at that, signal caller of the future? What's your take on the Matthew Stafford situation? What are your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, we brought up his back issues, and he's entering training camp with a sore back, and is probably going to miss be pretty limited. I think he's just going to be working off to the side there for the first week or so. So hopefully that doesn't become the infamous elbow situation of 2022, but we'll see, I guess. But yeah, as far as I guess his expectations go, I 2021 was such a special year, and I don't want to put those expectations on him, but he also, I think, needs to get more consistent. I mean, since 2021, he hasn't thrown for over 4,000 yards or 25 touchdowns in a season, and I mean, we've seen those special moments, those special moments from Stafford. I mean, the Eagles playoff game, he in that fourth quarter, bringing the Rams back, he was next level. Against the Bills in Week 14, he's going throw for throw with Josh Allen. Like he can have those weeks where like you see like why he's considered one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I think just from an expectation standpoint, I want him to be more consistent. He's very up one week where like I said, he shows why he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But then the next week he's just not that, and making questionable throws that a quarterback at age 36, 37 probably shouldn't be making. That last week he had just one stretch last season with back-to-back weeks in the top 10 in EPA per dropback. In the season before that, in 2023, he had 6 such stretches. So there I think, as much as I think Rams fans probably don't want to admit, I think we are starting to see maybe a little bit of a drop off in what Stafford is. There's obviously a lot of context to that. Last year, they dealt with offensive line injuries early on in the season. They weren't able to start the same 5 guys. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua both I think started the first 6 or so weeks hurt. So there's obviously context to that, and the situation just not being as good as it was in 2021. But I think at some point he has to be able to overcome those things a little bit, and like I said, just be more consistent. If obviously what makes Stafford special, he's able to have those high level weeks, but as far as the floor goes, just kind of level that out just a little bit. And then I guess too. Sorry, just going back to like how they address the draft. I think they kind of have one foot in each timeline. That I think they're committed to this window that they're currently in, and want to try to get one more ring with Stafford. But I think they also recognize that next year is a pretty special quarterback class, and they can, if they want to move on from Stafford after this year, they can. If not, they can still draft somebody, have him sit for a year, and you kind of end up with one of those kind of a Green Bay Packers situation with Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers, and before that Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. So I think that's the ideal situation for them, and we'll see how it works out.
How does having Davante Adams potentially affect Matthew Stafford in basically a sub in and sub out between Cooper Kupp and Davante Adams? What is he maybe gaining in Davante Adams that he potentially lost in Cooper Kupp's, injuries and stuff going on? Like, what does that addition do for Matthew Stafford?
I think where Adams I think is going to have the most impact is in the red zone. The Rams offense from a passing perspective just hasn't been as good there in recent years. Sorry about that. The dog's going crazy over here. But no, I think just Adams, the last 3 seasons has been one of the more productive wide receivers in contested catch success rate in the red zone. So as far as those, as much as I hate it, McVay loves to call the back shoulder fade. It's the play that won them the Super Bowl back in 2021 against the Bengals. He absolutely loves it. So I think that's an area where Adams gives them a little bit of an advantage, and then I think just a little bit more explosiveness. Like Kupp has dealt with injuries the last couple of years, and just kind of, I don't want to say he kind of has lost a step, and especially just kind of going in and out of his breaks. And I think just from a route running perspective, and just having that size on the outside, Adams kind of I think gives him more of that prototypical X wide receiver that McVay wants on the boundary.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that is one of his favorite things to go to is that back shoulder fade call, and I guess now with Davante Adams, that'll be a key thing in that offense for you guys. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and you kind of got to it there with Sean McVay, is Sean McVay's growth as a coach. You coming, like you said, 2021 was that really special year for you guys. It's been good, but it hasn't necessarily been great as of late. There were the question marks whether or not he was going to stay. What is what have you seen in a growth aspect from Sean McVay, whether it be as a play caller or as just a head coach? And what more growth do you think you need to see from him to potentially get this Rams team over the hump and not just rely on the players to do so?
Yeah, McVay's evolved so much since his first year in 2017, and I think especially over the last 2 years, he's matured a lot. I think you go back to how he handled the Jared Goff trade. He's admitted that he didn't handle that as well as he probably could have and should have. So I think if a situation kind of came up like that ever again, I think it'd be handled a lot better. And then I think from 2017 to 2021, especially 2018, after they lost that Super Bowl to the Patriots, I think his one goal was to win the Super Bowl. And when they did that in 2021, I don't think he got that fulfillment as much as he maybe thought he was going to. And it's kind of funny, just the timing of it. Scotty Scheffler kind of brought this up right before he won the Open last weekend. Like he just said, like the winning is just like it's such a short thing. It's not as fulfilling as we kind of make it out to be. It's a special moment, but that's all it is really just a moment. And so I think that 2022 season was McVay kind of going through that and I think enjoying the process more than that end result. So I think that just shows a lot of maturity from him. And as far as him taking that next level, it's hard to say just because he's already one of the best head coaches in the NFL. But I think it's just kind of I think he can be a little bit better from a time management standpoint, getting a little bit more aggressive. I think on fourth downs, which he did get better about the fourth down aggressiveness last year. I think he can be even better about that moving forward. And then just kind of I like to see kind of a lot more of that competitive fire that he had kind of early on in his career.
So the one thing I want to kind of pivot out in this question here, Blaine, is, we brought in Mike Macdonald, who now is the youngest head coach in the NFL. And he seems to have kind of figured out the Shanahan McVay system and giving it trouble. And, obviously for years prior to that with Pete Carroll, you guys diced us. We were basically like a fish at the Pike's market, just getting sliced up by Sean McVay consistently. Last year, we saw a bit of a change for that as Seahawks fans. How do you think Sean McVay is able to kind of get back to maybe having the top hand on a defensive coach like Mike Macdonald? Or do you think that's just going to be an ongoing back and forth battle for the next couple of years? That one, for me, I'm excited to see. I don't know about yourself, though.
Yeah, no, I actually think the Seahawks defense is going to give the Rams offense maybe more fits than it did last year. That Macdonald defense, I think, just looking at his history, kind of takes that jump in year two. And Seattle, that you guys have a lot of really talented players on that defense, so I would expect a pretty significant jump there. But no, I kind of see it kind of being a back and forth battle, and I think it's gonna be fun to watch. Watching their first meeting against when the Rams played the Ravens back in 2023. I think that was one of the more fun games of the year, and the Rams put 31 points on in that game. But yeah, it's and then last year, I think for the most part in that first meeting in Seattle, Macdonald kind of gave McVay fits, and then Stafford did what Stafford does in the fourth quarter and led a comeback. But no, I kind of see it being this back and forth in division battle, which I think, like you said, is going to be really fun to watch over the next couple of years.
So one thing you talked about was the use of the 12 personnel, and that usually leads to running backs and running the ball, which is something we know McVay likes to do. What is the running back depth like right now with the, LA Rams? There's a lot of people that were disappointed in what Blake Corum didn't do, I should say, considering all the high praise that was coming out of him from Michigan. You've got Williams there. They're very similar players in somewhat in their styles of running, and then you guys brought in Hunter. Like, how do you see this running back room shaping up? What do you think of it going forward?
Yeah, I still think Kyren Williams is the depth there is a lot better than it has been in the past. When Kyren got hurt in 2023, they ended up having to sign Royce Freeman off the street. They just didn't have the depth there. So I think that's why they went out and got Blake Corum in the following draft, just to kind of so they weren't losing anything if Kyren Williams did go down. But I still think Williams is the guy. Last year, he led NFL running backs with an 86.4% snap rate. He was tied with, I think, Jonathan Taylor um in in rushing attempts. So yeah, he's a guy. He's a guy that McVay trusts. I do think they need to get more explosive there, which is why I do think they brought in Hunter. And earlier I mentioned that McVay praised Liam Cohen and the running game that he was able to implement in Tampa Bay last year. And I'm probably drinking a little bit of hopium here, but I would love to see some of that 21 personnel that the Buccaneers implemented last year, with using Rashad White and Bucky Irving on the field together. I would love to see that with a Kyren Williams or Blake Corum in that kind of Rashad White role, and then Jarquez Hunter in that Bucky Irving kind of more explosive, more explosive player in that room. So I would love to see that, but yeah, I kind of think Corum pick was maybe a little bit of an overreaction to Kyren Williams' injury the year before, and then taking Hunter this year, I think was them kind of reacting to. Kyren Williams he's a really good player. He'll hit you a single every single time, but he's very rarely he's going to get a triple or a home run, and that's kind of what's going to take this offense and running game in particular to that next level. I think Kyren only had like a 1.8% explosive run rate, which is it can't happen. That was one of the worst in the league. So I think Hunter brings a little bit more explosiveness to that room, and gives them a little bit more variety that they lack. Like you said, Corum was kind of a little bit of a carbon copy of Kyren.
Do you think you're going to see more of these guys involved in the passing game now, and their skill sets being used more in this passing, in the Rams passing game, due to, like you said earlier, you're going to see the Cooper Kupp targets kind of get dispersed throughout this offense, whether it's to the tight ends? Do you think some of those even get dispersed to a Kyren Williams or Blake Corum coming out of the backfield more?
Yeah, I would love to see Jarquez Hunter honestly get involved in the passing game, kind of that satellite motion role, coming in behind the quarterback or whatnot. I would love to see that. I don't really see Kyren being that effective in the screen game. I just don't think that fits his skill set. But Hunter didn't really get utilized in that role at Auburn, but I think he has a skill set to do it. So I really see Kyren and Hunter kind of being that complement to one another. Whereas Corum, I think, is kind of more of a fill-in for Kyren, just because they are so similar. But it is funny because you go back to the 2017-2018 Rams offense, and Todd Gurley is just absolutely destroying teams in the screen game, and Gurley was a special running back, but the Rams haven't used the running backs in the passing game in that way since. And yeah, I would love to see it, but it needs to happen for me to believe it, I guess.
So let's move over to the other side of the ball here. Your guys' secondary, and so I put secondary vulnerabilities here with a question mark, because for me, I actually thought you guys had a pretty good secondary last year. Witherspoon and some of these other guys that you've now kind of put together in this back end of this defense. And when I watch, because obviously we acquired Sam Darnold, and I watched your guys' game against him in the playoffs, and I've gone back and watched it numerous times because everybody and their brother wants to throw Sam Darnold under the bus for that game. And I go back and I watch the all-22 and I go, where's Sam Darnold supposed to go with the ball? Like, your guys' secondary locked down that Vikings passing attack in a lot of ways. And he ended up eating the ball and taking these sacks because there was nobody open. So is it really because they're kind of this unknown group, I guess I would say, and you got Jared Verse and Braden Fisk on this defensive front here, that they like the defensive front seven seems to get more attention in your guys' defense than the secondary, but this secondary is pretty good. Do you think there's any vulnerabilities in it?
You're a lot more confident in the secondary than I am. Yeah, I was very surprised when they didn't address it at all in the offseason. They obviously claimed Emmanuel Forbes last year, kind of late in the year, hoping to maybe get something out of someone who was a former first round pick. But I do think as far as like the Vikings game go, I think that's more of a matchup thing. They were able to pretty much recreate what the Lions had done with just using a lot of man coverage and kind of exploiting the Vikings passing game that way and just taking away that timing. But for the most part, it's weird because I don't love that. I do not love the talent in that secondary. I think Akella Witherspoon kind of is a little bit overhyped. Darius Williams, it's just kind of a familiar face that they were able to bring back last year, and it just is a steady presence. Kobe Durant, I think, is a little is very undersized. I think too undersized to play the slot. You can kind of get exploited in the run game a little bit. But yet you look at the stats and from week 7 to 17 last year, they ranked 14th in dropback EPA allowed. So it's weird. It works. Chris Shula, I think, did a very good job with that group after the bye week. They obviously benefit a lot from that pass rush, which was so good that they do play off of each other. I'm excited to see what they do in year 2 under Shula. Like I said, they did play well in the back half of last year, but I think as far as the defense goes, that the secondary, especially the corners, give me a lot of concern.
How do you view that matchup now with Seattle? With obviously we don't have DK, we don't have Tyler Lockett anymore. We've changed our offensive coordinator to Clint Kubiak in his scheme. We took obviously Cooper Kupp. Once you guys released him, we signed him. He pairs with JSN, and we've got a couple of tight ends now in AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo now that Noah Fant's been cut. How do you look at Seattle's passing attack, and how does it match up versus your Rams secondary? Does it give you any worry with the new play caller and Cooper Kupp being on the other side, or do you think it might actually match up better than what had been in the past when Seattle did have DK and Tyler?
Yeah, I'm excited to see kind of the step forward, and another step forward, I should say, because JSN had a really good year last year. But I am kind of excited to see him as the player in the offense now. Like, he is the guy in the receiver room. I think he's the guy that gives me the most worry, especially over the middle of the field. That's kind of where the Rams can be exploited, just because the linebacker group isn't that good, especially in coverage, and then the corners, I think kind of struggle there as well. Like I said, I think Durant, despite his size, I think he's much better on the outside than he is in the slot. I think it'll be interesting. I think especially when this Rams and Seahawks play each other this year, just kind of that kind of revenge factor that the Cup has. I don't think he was necessarily happy about leaving Los Angeles. I don't think it was something that he wanted to do, and being able to go against him twice a year, I think is going to motivate him a little bit. But no, I think as far as the Seahawks wide receivers matching up against the Rams cornerbacks, I think JSN, just his explosiveness and his athleticism, I think that's something that the Rams are. I think we saw at times last year. I forget what JSN had in that first game, but I think he had a pretty good game. If I remember.
Did.
Yeah,
he did.
Yeah, so I think just his explosiveness and his athleticism is something the Rams are going to have to account for.
So let's take a look here, Blaine, at the NFC West as a whole, obviously. So we both have our teams in it. There's still the Niners and the Cardinals. What was your overall look at this offseason for all the teams in the division, not just the Rams? And How do you feel this division's kind of going to shape up this year? Do you think it'll be one of the stronger divisions in the NFL and in the NFC for one? And how do you kind of see each team stacking up? Like, if you had to give me your 1 through 4, where do you think the standings sit at the end of the year?
Yeah, I think this is a division that's pretty tough to predict. I don't necessarily this might come as shocking, but I don't necessarily see Seattle as being a top contender in the NFC West. But I do think they're going to be a feisty team, and I could see them still finishing 9-8 or 10-7 or whatnot, and kind of being there right until the very end. I really like what all these teams did in the offseason, quite frankly. I think that the Cardinals address, I think, some of the concerns that they had last year. I think their schedule kind of begins pretty favorably. I think the first 6 games they play the Saints. They could very easily win that. The Panthers, another winnable game. At San Francisco, they may lose. They may lose that. Then a home game against the Seahawks, home game against Tennessee, and then they play the Colts. Like that could be a 5-1 start for them, or 4-2, and that would kind of put them right in the contention to kind of start the year. And then Call of Duty comes out, and Kyler Murray will kind of fade down the stretch. And then I think the 49ers are going to. I think they kind of had a year last year like the Rams had in 2022. So so they're kind of in this transition period now. Kind of trying to get a little younger, and than they have been in the past. So I do see a bounce back here for the 49ers. I think their schedule is unfortunately very 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 easy.
Yes.
So they'll be right there. And then as far as the Rams go, I think they're the defending champs. I think they should be considered the favorites. Their schedule, I think, unfortunately, is a little tougher, especially at the beginning. I could see another situation like last year where the Rams kind of start slow and then pick it up towards the end and maybe steal the division late. But as far as 1 through 4 goes, I think I'd probably go maybe the Rams, 49ers, and then I don't think the Seahawks and Cardinals are far behind them at 3 and 4.
So would you say it's a safe bet to say that you think most of these teams are going to finish with an above 500 record?
Yeah, I could see all these teams honestly finishing like around 8 to 11 wins. Like I think it's going to be a very close, very tight division.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Like, I think this is one of the very few years where you could see the 4th place team in this be a 9-7 team, and it goes to tiebreakers, and somehow they're 9-7 and miss out on the playoffs. But some other team that really isn't as good, clearly like the rest of the divisions in the NFC, their 2nd place or 3rd place team may be below 500. I think it's, like you said, they all had pretty good off seasons. I'm not so sold on the 49ers. I think they're gonna be, yes, they got a very favorable schedule. I will not disagree with you on that. Like, I kind of looked at it and I went, wow, how did the Niners get that schedule and that easy of a schedule? But it'll be very interesting to see how their aging talent fares throughout the season. There's a lot of, obviously stake put into Robert Saleh coming back and his ability to turn that defense around, which really, outside of Fred Warner and Joey Bosa now, Nick Bosa, you're relying on a lot of unknowns like Michael Williams and, Collins and these guys that you drafted to come in and produce right away. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see. I've got the Rams and Seahawks fighting out for 1 and 2. I've got the 49ers in 3rd. I've got the Cardinals in 4th. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that division plays out. I think Seattle will be above 10, like 9 wins. I think they'll be somewhere in the 10 to 12 area, and maybe they sneak out a couple games potentially, but I think it'll come down to them and the Rams at the end to see who actually wins the division. So another part of this, Blaine, I got to ask you, what's your bold prediction for your LA Rams team this year? Something that you're going to put out there, and we'll see if it comes to fruition. And maybe not the most realistic take, but what is your bold prediction for the LA Rams this year?
Yeah, I think the Rams become the first team to repeat as the NFC West champion since the Seahawks did it in 2018-19. I mean, that may not be super bold, but I think they can do it. And then just from an individual player standpoint, I think Jared Verse does take that next step. And if he doesn't win Defensive Player of the Year, I think he's right there and is I'll put him in the top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting, right there with Myles Garrett and TJ Watt.
Do you think his sack numbers go up this year and that's the reason he's in that category, or do you think it'll be something else that puts him up in there?
No, I think it's definitely it'll be the sack category. I mean, even last year, like the sacks weren't necessarily there, but you which unfortunately, like the media is gonna just kind of look at the stat sheet, unfortunately. But you watch the game, you watch the games, and even when Verse isn't getting to the quarterback and getting the sack, he's impacting the play in some way. He kind of, I don't want to compare him to Aaron Donald because Donald is just such a special next level greatest of all time type player, but Versus ability to just impact the play without making the play necessarily, I think was was something that pretty special for a rookie. So, but yeah, I think as far as him kind of being in that defensive player of the year conversation, I see him surpassing the maybe getting between 10 and 14 sacks.
And my final topic for us, I can't let you get out of here without discussing the Seahawks a little bit on here, because if my listeners just hear Ram stuff the entire time, I will get blasted. But what was your opinion of what Seattle did this offseason? You know, obviously the moves they made, the changes within the organization player-wise, and just even their draft and everything. Like, do you think the Seahawks took a step forward, or do you think they've kind of stayed in neutral from where they were last year with Mike McDonald's group at the end of the year?
I'll say they. I think they last year McDonald came in and maybe tried to. I don't want to say continue up what Pete Carroll had, but maybe just try to hold on to it a little bit, just because I mean Pete Carroll had a ton of success with the Seahawks, obviously, and so you don't want to necessarily completely blow that up. I think this year, I don't want to say they took a step back, but I think they maybe took like a half step back to take 2 steps forward. Two steps forward next year and kind of become more of a Mike McDonald team. Obviously, you know, I think that's part of the reason why they move on from a Geno Smith. That's why they bring in a culture guy like a Cooper Kupp in the offense. That's why they I think again bring in a new offensive coordinator to kind of, you know, handle that side of the ball for McDonald, so he can focus on the defense a little bit more. I do think that defense is going to be really special this year. I there's so much talent. On that group, where I think that they do at some point become the identity of that team, much like the Legion of Boom was for so long. But I think this year they kind of maybe stay in neutral, kind of similar to where they were at last year. But I see in the next year or two them taking up a pretty big step forward.
So my other question for you here on the Seahawks here, Blaine, is what did you make of the Jalen Milroe selection?
So he wasn't my. I think where they took him, he was a risk worth taking. I didn't see him as a first round quarterback, but he certainly has the athleticism, has the arm talent to be very good. He's just very inconsistent. I think his accuracy is pretty spotty, but if that works out, it could be. It could be very it could be special just because of just how athletic he is. I don't want to put him in the same caliber as like a Lamar or whatever, but just he has that type of athleticism. I think if he can develop as a passer, that will end up being, I think, a home run pick for them.
Yeah, no, that's kind of my take on it as well. As I'm happy they took someone with a lot of high upside and potential that you don't have to play right away. Like, yes, you can play him in some of these sub packages near the goal line for your red zone offense, but you're not asking him to go in there and play a full game as a quarterback, make all the progression reads, do all that. You can let him sit there. And the fact that they even signed Drew Lock to a 2-year deal tells me that I think that they look at this as a 2027 potential for Jalen Milroe, and you go forward with Sam Darnold and, you know, Drew Lock going forward. But with that being said, Blaine, I really appreciate you jumping on the show here and doing this Rams preview for the 2025 season. Blaine, where can my listeners find more of your content so throughout the year they can listen to your perspective on the LA Rams?
Yes, you can find all my work over at turfshowtimes.com. I put out a ton of articles there every week, and then I'm always on Twitter. You can find me over there at @bgrisaktst, and hopefully it's a fun year. I know a lot of Rams fans in LA. They hate the 49ers, but I grew up on the West Coast, or I grew up kind of in the I grew up in Montana, so I just like I was in Seahawks territory. Grew up absolutely hating the Seahawks. So it's been a fun rivalry for me my entire life. So I'm looking forward to seeing what these two teams do this year.
Yeah, it should be an exciting year, Blaine, and thank you so much. We look forward to having you back sometime this season to talk more Rams.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for me. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later, Blaine.
Yeah.
Thanks. And guys, that was my interview with Blaine Grisak of Turf Times, covering the LA Rams. He also does fantasy football for SB Nation as well. So, guys, all the descriptions for his work will be down below in the description here. Outside of that, guys, I think that was a really good insight look into what's going on with the LA Rams. We went over a variety of different topics there. I thought it was his, description of what's going on with Matthew Stafford was one. Obviously, he's already going into camp kind of nicked up, which is something with an aging quarterback can be a bit of a problem. And then, what he talked about there with, Davante Adams and some of these different pieces and how he thinks Sean McVay wants to get back to being a 12 personnel team and a team with multiple tight ends, which is why they took Terrence Ferguson. They've now got Ferguson, Parkinson, and Higbee there. He still thinks Higbee is going to be a viable piece to this offense and extremely valuable as well. And, you heard him say that he thinks the Seahawks defense has a chance to be really special and that it's something that them and him as a Rams, content creator is something that, they look at and go, yeah, that's going to be a special group there in Seattle. Now, again, he thinks what a lot of the national media thinks, which is Seattle still kind of the stuck in neutral 10-7, 9-7 kind of team. I personally think Seattle might be better off now that they have a stable offense. And that'll be something that, I think we'll find out. I don't know if Seattle's offense will come out firing on all cylinders week 1 through 5. But I think we could see something that we saw last year with Mike McDonald's defense, where you get to that halfway point in the season and things start to really click and guys start to really get an understanding of how things are supposed to work. He seems to think Cooper Kupp's going to be a, valuable guy for us to have here. And the fact that Cooper didn't really want to leave LA. So, there's a lot of good things to take away from that interview. Make sure also, guys, I forgot to mention earlier, check out the HawksZoneRundown.com merchandise store where you can get a hat like this one. We will also be sending out and putting out on social media and even on this show a couple different logo designs that we're going to come out with as alternative logos, and we want you guys to vote on them. Which ones do you want to see on a t-shirt, a hat, a golf shirt, a hoodie? Let us know in the comments below once those get released. But guys, make sure you engage in the comments. We love interacting with you guys. Share this video, share this channel with anybody that you know is a diehard Seahawks fan, and help us get over 2,000 subscribers. We're really close. We're pushing that number. But make sure, guys, at the end of the time, training camp is around the corner. It's basically here. So let's see what these Seahawks can do this year. Go Hawks.